Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
This episode of the Sports Spectrum podcast with Covenant College men's basketball coach Neal Young is brought to you by Compassion International, $38 a month, releasing a child from poverty. Food, education, medical care, vocational training, all done in the name of Jesus. Your chance to make a difference, and imagine how far $38 could go every single month. How about releasing a child from poverty? And this is your chance to do that with the great folks at Compassion International, the most trusted child development ministry in the world. Go to compassion.com/sportsspectrum, compassion.com/sportsspectrum, and sponsor a child today. Today's guest on the podcast is Neal Young. And Neal is the head men's basketball coach at Covenant College in Georgia. Covenant College is a Division III school, actually near Chattanooga, Tennessee, with a Georgia address. And this is the beauty of this podcast that I love so much. Yes, I love talking to people who are big names on the podcast. We recently talked to Dansby Swanson from the Braves, Benjamin Watson from the Saints, just really big names with amazing stories to tell. And then there's Neal Young. And when you hear Neal Young, you probably think of music. And this is not that Neal Young. But Neal Young, his story is just as important as my story, or your story, or Benjamin Watson's story, or Dansby Swanson's story, or Tim Tebow's story, or Tony Dungy's story. Neal Young has a story to share, and it's a powerful one. He's in his second year now, coaching at Covenant College, and he actually tied the school record for single-season winning percentage in his first season last year. He was a former Goshen College in Indiana basketball coach for 4 seasons. Now, within a month of getting that first head coaching job at Goshen, Neal found out he had cancer. He remained as the head coach, but in the process of going through chemo treatments, he suffered from severe depression. And so in this podcast, we talk about what it was like to find out he had cancer. And then how, in August of 2013, he died and then came back to life. And you'll hear that story in a little bit. But we talk about fear and doubt, walking away from Christ. Is that even a possibility? Or are you walking toward him when cancer comes? A lot of people go into a depression, sort of mental illness state. And that's exactly what happened with Neal. So how did he deal with that? Great stuff here from Neal, and I really just wanted to hear it from a coaching perspective. This is a leader of men. This is a coach in college basketball, trusting in Jesus and walking through a very difficult season of life. So take a listen to the powerful story of Neal Young, Covenant College men's basketball coach, here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Neal, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jason. It's exciting to be here.
Yeah, it's good to talk to you, Neal, and I'm excited to kind of learn about your journey, and I know it's been one that's been somewhat of a roller coaster for you, but let's start with Covenant College and kind of how you came about getting that position and what it's been like the last year and a half or so, I guess, since you've been with the squad. Now you're in your second season. How are things going with Covenant College?
Yeah, it's been really good. Getting the job was a whirlwind, so I didn't get hired until August 2017, which is really, really late to hire a basketball coach. My AD called me on a Friday. I was on family vacation, just kind of getting ready to go back and really get into the 2017-2018 season at Goshen College, where I was previously. Called me on a Friday, went really well. Phone interview on Wednesday, flew down there Thursday, interviewed on campus Friday. Then accepted the job on Saturday and told my team Saturday afternoon. So it was just a really, really quick process. My AD, Tim Sedgwick, was like a hiring wizard and how quick he can get that stuff done sometimes. But it was great. Moved down here about 3 or 4 weeks after I accepted the job, started looking for a house and trying to get some stuff situated. But year one was really good. One of my friends, Artie Culver, had the job previously. He left to take a job at Vanderbilt. And then a guy by the name of Kyle Taylor, who is at Idaho as an assistant. had it before him. And those two guys, I mean, they just really did a good job. And so I inherited a really good group that had been coached, and that just really understood how to do things right. And so it was a really good situation to step in. We had a good year. And then this year got off to a rough start, but then got into a groove and got on a little bit of a streak. And so this year's kind of turned around and we're trending in the right direction.
How hard is that? Happens a lot in college sports and honestly in any job. I mean, we all have had different jobs throughout our lives. How hard is that to have that conversation with the players at your former college and your former job and tell them, hey, God is calling me somewhere else? How difficult was that for you to have that conversation?
Tough. It was incredibly difficult. And the crazy thing is, it's like, I knew I was making the right decision. Yeah. I tell people all the time, it was really easy to leave, to take the job at Covenant, just because I knew so many things lined up. It was very evident that that's where God had called our family, my wife and I, and our two little ones at the time. But it was very, very difficult to leave your team. And I think it should be. I don't care where you're at as a coach. It should always be really difficult to leave your team. And it was certainly difficult for me. It was very emotional conversation, and it was tough. But ever since then, it's been good, and we know we're in the right spot and what God has for us right now, for sure.
Was coaching something you always wanted to do, Neal?
It is. I grew up in Muncie, Indiana, and so if you're familiar with Muncie, Ball State. So I grew up in Indiana, basketball country, but I was never an IU or a Purdue or a Butler guy. I mean, I was a Ball State Cardinal fan. And so that was my team, and that was back in the early mid-'90s when MAC basketball was just, it was the real deal. You had guys like Gary Trent, you had guys like Earl Boykins, Wally Zerbiak, and then Ball State, we had a pro too, Bonzi Wells. Yeah. And so it was just so much. And I just grew up going to all those games. I never missed a game. And as I watched those games, and it was like, man, like those guys are really, really good. They're really big. They're really strong. They're really fast. I don't know if I can do what they do, but then I would always find myself kind of drawn to the sidelines, and watching the coaches. And I was like, man, I think I might be able to do that, though. All I know is I just want to be a part of this atmosphere of college athletics. And so, yeah, I've been drawn to coaching ever since I was little. And it's just kind of always been what I really wanted to do, for sure.
Neal Young's our guest here on the Sports Spectrum podcast, Covenant College men's basketball coach. How often do you get riled about your name? Just saying Neal Young joins us here on the podcast, and I'm like, nope, not that Neal Young, a different Neal Young. That must have been something that you got riled from your friends and family for a long time.
Oh, no question. It's funny. So, we've obviously talked a little bit before this, and when I found out you were going to have me on, my wife was scrolling through your previous podcast, and she was listing off all these big name guests and kind of the who's who. And she was like, man, they're going to think you're the singer. Like they're going to think it's that one. And I was like, well, I hope they do think it's that one. Otherwise they're not going to listen, and that's going to hurt his numbers. And so, hopefully we can use that to our advantage a little bit. But yeah, it's pretty much every day, which is okay. It's fun. I have fun with it. But yeah, it certainly, gives me kind of a unique way to be able to start conversations with people, for sure.
Hey, if people listen to this podcast thinking it's the other Neal Young and somehow they get a little Jesus in their life, then what's wrong with that, right? What is wrong
exactly
with that?
You got to take it any way you can get it, man.
That's right. And speaking of that, actually, why don't you share with us your testimony, your faith walk, and kind of where Christ started to become Lord of your life and when you made Jesus your Savior?
Yeah, so when I was really little, I think I was like, I can't remember. My mom would know all the details, but I think I was like, 5 or 6, like little. My grandma ran Vacation Bible School at my church growing up. And so I was in there all the time, every session. And so I was little, and I just came in and asked my mom. I said, Mom, I want Jesus to come into my heart. Will you pray with me? And so, she prayed with me, it was how I was really little, but it wasn't until, honestly, Jason, to when I moved out of my house and went to college. That's where it all changed. That's when I really started to take ownership of it, because I had to. When you go off to college, you've got to make that choice. You can't ride on the coattails of anyone else's faith anymore. I mean, my mom is not coming to my dorm room at Ball State my freshman year to wake me up and make sure I'm in church. So you really got to make a decision. And I was fortunate enough to get connected with some really good guys, Christian guys that it was kind of the first time in my life that I'd ever been around anybody that was really doing it as far as living for Christ and really passionate about their faith and unashamed and just doing it. You know what I mean? And it's when you're around people with authentic faith, there's just an energy, and it's just something different. And so that's when I was like, man, I want this. This is what I want, and I'm gonna really try to take ownership of my faith and really try to grow. And obviously, it hasn't been a straight line of growth from that point until now, but that's when it really, really started for me, for sure.
In 2013, you get your first head coaching position in college, like you mentioned earlier, at Goshen College. It's an NAIA Division II school in Indiana. And some circumstances happened immediately after that really probably changed your life forever. But before we get to that moment, just a few days after, take us to the process of becoming a head coach and kind of what led to you getting that first job, that first opportunity to be the head man.
Yeah, for sure. So I graduated from Anderson University in 2008 and knew I wanted to be a coach. I was getting married that summer to my now wife, Maggie. Been married ever since then, but knew I wanted to coach. And so, there's no coaching major. And so ended up majoring in education, which was really good for me, but just started emailing and calling everybody, basically just begging for a job. I wasn't familiar with Hoop Dirt at the time. That would have helped me out a little bit, made it a little easier maybe, but just trying to get my name out there, just trying to connect. And a guy named Gary Chupp at Goshen College was one of the few to respond. And I emailed, everybody in Indiana at every level, everybody in Ohio, everybody in Michigan. I'm working my way through Illinois. And he responds and he's just like, hey, I'm looking for a guy. And I was like, great. And so went up there, interviewed. He offered me the job. And it paid $4,000. And you would have thought that he offered me a job for $4 million by how excited I was to get that job offer. And it was great. I still remember the phone call when he offered me the job. And it was before we got married, but my wife was there. We were really excited. And it was great. And so we got married in July. Went on our honeymoon, came back and started coaching. I coached at Goshen as an assistant for 3 years, and then went to Lewis University, Division II, by Chicago for 2 years and worked for Scots. Still a coach there, really successful coach, and had a chance to work with a guy by the name of Adam DeMond, who's now with Under Armour, and really helped me a lot. So I was there for 2 years, and then right after I got my master's, because I was the GA there, right after I got my master's, the guy who hired me at Goshen had decided to resign and take a high school athletic director position. And the AD at Goshen, we actually both started on the same day. So when I got hired as an assistant, he had got hired as the AD there. We both started on the same day. It was in the summer. We were just kind of the only two in there, a lot of the times, and we built a really good relationship. And he took a chance on me, and he hired me. So I got hired April 2013. As a head coach at Goshen, and again was thrilled. I was overjoyed. Never expected to have the opportunity to be a head coach at that point in my career, but it was really good.
And then the highest of highs. Sometimes, I always tell people when you're a follower of Christ, really anybody, but when you're a follower of Christ, it isn't all sunshine and pretty flowers. Things happen, trials happen. Stuff comes at us. And for you, it came at you in a pretty big way. Can you tell us what happened?
Yeah. So so got the job April 2nd, 2013, was moving to Goshen May 31st. And a couple days before we moved, I went to the doctor because I was had a little cold. Nothing major, but just I went to the doctor because I was like, no, I need to get some medicine. Moving's terrible enough as it is, let alone if you're sick. So I need to try to get a Z-Pack or something. And so I went to the doctor, and I had like a dry cough. And I guess, that symptom didn't match other symptoms. So the doctor, Dr. Katua, I still remember his name, did a chest x-ray. And chest x-ray came back and I had like a mass. It showed like a mass in my chest. But he didn't know what it was. There was a list of things that it could have been. And, cancer was like the last thing on the list. And I didn't think there's no way it was cancer. And so ended up moving May 31st. That morning I had gotten a biopsy on it because X-ray, MRI to biopsy, that's kind of the progression. And then on June 3rd, so, 4 days after we moved, I got the phone call from Dr. Katua saying it was T-cell lymphoblastic lymphoma. And then he immediately put me on the line with Dr. Wendy Stock, who is awesome. And we talked for 20 minutes and started treatment the next day. So it was crazy. It was crazy.
A couple days after, I want to walk through this progression with you now, obviously to where we are, but really the initial news that you find out. You're married, obviously, Maggie. You mentioned your wife is with you when you find out this news. Walk us through the emotions you're feeling, where faith plays a role in this. Because I tell people all the time, even if you're the most devout follower of Christ, when you get news like that, man, it's hard. And some people I know even have walked away from God when they get news like that, and others walk and run, I should say, towards him. Take us through the emotions and immediate aftermath after finding out that you had cancer.
Yeah, my wife and I were actually talking about this last night. We don't really reflect back on this time of our life much. And when we do, we try not to reflect necessarily back on the emotion that came along with it. It's just kind of more the results of a lot of things. But yeah, I still remember getting a call. We were in a furniture store. Sofa Select was the name of the furniture store. And you got to understand, so my first 5 years of coaching,
right,
I made a combined $32,000. And so
raking in the dough, Neal, raking in the dough.
Just raking it in. No, and my wife was a teacher.
Yeah.
And so then I get this job, and it's small college, so I'm not making anything still, but it's, at least, kind of like what a teacher in that realm. And so my wife and I, we didn't have kids at the time. We're just like, I think we're rich. I think we might be rich now.
Right.
And so, maybe we should go get a couch that doesn't, have lumps in it and stab you when you sit certain places. And so we're at this, what we would have considered like a nice furniture store. And I'm sitting in like this $7,000 recliner that we would never buy. But, so I like to joke that I got the worst news of my life when I was sitting in the best chair I've ever sat in. And so maybe that's what made it a little easier to take. But I can't act like I had this super holy response. It was I just remember hearing it, and my wife could hear as well. She could kind of hear through the phone. It wasn't on speaker, but she could hear. And my wife just kind of immediately just kind of broke down. It was honestly the only time throughout the whole process that she ever broke down, which is amazing to think about.
Yeah.
But just immediately, and I remember in that moment, I just wanted to make her feel better. It was just kind of like an instinctual thing. And so for whatever reason, there was just, from the second I got diagnosed, I just knew, I just had a very strong sense of like, this is just part of the journey. This isn't the end. This is just part. This is just something that we have to get through. And so I wasn't fearful in any way in terms of like dying. And I don't know, if that was from God. I don't know. I think so. I think he kind of gave me that peace. I think, it sure sounds like the peace that passes understanding to me. But, I just wanted to make sure everybody knew I was going to be okay. And so for me, it didn't really start to get tough until the treatment started to wear on me. It was almost more of a annoyance, because I was like, man, I just got this job, like got a lot of work to do, got to recruit, got to do this, got to do that. Now I got to go get treatment and blah, blah, blah. But honestly, it was just kind of like okay, like this is what it is, like this isn't the end. This is just this is going to be a chapter in the our story, my story. And was just kind of able to kind of react like that, which I'm thankful for that. It was very helpful.
Did you ever allow, fear or doubt? I know you said that you never kind of feared dying, I guess, or using even that word, but did you ever have those moments, even just by yourself, where you were kind of like, all right, this, maybe it was during chemo, or just having those quiet moments when fear or doubt might have crept in at all?
No question. I mean, doubt for sure. Like, chemo just ravages your body. Yeah. And so it got to a point where the chemo had just really worn me down. I was suffering from depression, and even, the doubt was just like, man, is this ever going to end? Like, am I ever going to get back to what I was? Am I ever going to have energy? Am I ever going to have enthusiasm? Am I ever going to be able to coach the way that I want to coach? Am I ever going to be able to, go work out or mow our lawn or kind of be the quote unquote like man of the house? Am I ever going to be able to like protect my wife? I mean, certainly those doubts for sure happen, just because, when you feel that weak and that just down and you're kind of in that dark place. I mean, doubt is a very, very real thing. It was a very real part of my experience for sure.
You mentioned earlier that you never really worried about or thought about, I guess, death in that way, because you got that peace that passes all understanding. But as I was reading up on your story, in a way, death actually did come into play a couple months later, right? What happened there?
Yeah. It was pretty wild. So, I was going to get treatment, and there was one drug in my treatment plan. It's called peg asparaginase. I can't spell it, but I can say it. And it's unbelievably powerful. Like, my treatment plan was about 2.5 years. And in that 2.5 years, I was only supposed to get that drug 4 times, because it's so powerful. Right. And it's, some people are just really, really sensitive to it. And so the first time I got it, nothing really happened. And then the second time I got it, I kind of felt like I had like a slight allergic reaction, got a little itchy, felt a little weird, just kind of weird. And then the third time I got it, I literally went into cardiac arrest, and my heart stopped for 2 minutes. Wow. And, obviously I wasn't legally pronounced dead, right. But in a way I died. And so, I still remember they kind of injected it. My nurse walked out of the room, and instantly it was just like, uh-oh, like something's not right. And so I pushed the nurse call button, and Natalie, my nurse, it was awesome. To this day, she's an awesome, awesome person. Yeah. She walked in, and she was like, hey, what's up? And I was trying to get up, and she said, I don't remember this, but she said I just kind of started to say something, and then my words just kind of slurred, and then my eyes rolled back, and I just passed out. And then next thing I know, I wake up, and there's 20, 30 people around, just surrounded, just working on me. And it was pretty crazy. Spent a couple of days in ICU, and ended up just recovering fine. But what I was told was that the drug was so powerful that my body just kind of developed an allergy to it. As I got it those other times, and then just basically just completely shut down once it got into my system that third time. And so, yeah, that was an interesting experience for sure. It was crazy.
That is, the Bible says to die to ourselves daily, but that's going to a whole nother level, right, Neal?
Yeah, my wife I try to, I like to joke around and, a little sarcastic and, love a good Seinfeld episode. So I was trying to joke about it after the fact, and my wife was not think those jokes were very funny. But it was, it was an interesting experience, sir. It puts me in some unique company in terms of people that have had that experience, no doubt.
So you said it was a couple years of getting chemo. That sounds like a long time. And I mean, certainly I'm sure for you going through that, it was a long time. But tell us about the treatment process and take us to where you are now and how your health is now.
Yeah, so when I got diagnosed, I started treatment the next day. And I was in the hospital for 10 straight days getting chemo. From what I remember, I believe it was every day. And then they sent me home after that. And then I came back once a week for a year. And it was a little over a year, really. But that was the time, and it was just brutal. Just kind of progressively just took its toll on me. Got admitted to the hospital a few times. And when you take, getting chemo, if you get a fever, it can be really, really bad and go sideways in a hurry. So that happened a couple times, and, had to get, multiple blood transfusions. And it was just a lot, driving, my treatment was in Chicago. We lived in Goshen. It's about 2 hours away, so driving 2 hours each way once a week, just wore on you. And then after that, it was once every 30 days for a little over a year after that. And that's when I kind of started to kind of get the energy back and kind of climb out of the depression once it was a lot less frequent. But yeah, it was difficult for sure. I mean, there were some really, really tough times, really dark times. I mean, it got to the point where, we had a basement, our washer and dryer was in our basement, and I couldn't even make it up and down the stairs to help with the laundry. I couldn't walk by myself. I couldn't walk to the end of our driveway to get the paper and bring it back. I was basically just completely dependent on my wife and other people to help me get from A to B. And it was just, it was a long stretch. We were just like, wake up, do everything you can to get out to the couch. And then that's kind of my spot for the day. And you just kind of go deep into the Netflix vault. And you just kind of wait for Mags. My wife's name is Maggie. I call her Mags. Wait for Mags to get home from school. And then just kind of hang out for the rest of the night on the couch, go back to bed. And so it was tough. I tried to coach. That was more me kind of, being ignorant to what was coming. Ignorance was bliss for a while, until it caught up with me, but ended up having to take a leave 19 games in for that season, didn't finish out the year. And that was tough. But then that next season was certainly better with it only being once every 30 days.
So how is your health now? How are you doing now?
Now it's great. I'm kind of at this spot now where this is the spot that I always wondered if I was ever going to get to, just where I'm excited about life. I have enthusiasm. I have energy. I'm able to exercise. I'm able to play with my kids. I'm able to be active. Just my health is good. It's just really good, and just feel, just unbelievably fortunate to just every day that I get healthy. It's just a good day. Even if we lose or have a bad practice, it's a good day. Yeah. When you can wake up and do what you love and do it with energy and enthusiasm and exercise, and kind of, I've got 2 little kids and start chasing them around. It's just, there was a time when I just doubted, and you mentioned doubt earlier. It's like, man, am I ever going to be able to play with my son or my kids? And, so it's good now. There's just no complaints at all.
What was the biggest lesson you learned, Neal, during the cancer battle, the fight, even the diagnosis? And it could be faith, or it just could be something that it's practical that you implement into your life. But what's the biggest lesson that you take away now that you look back and it's been 5 years now?
Yeah, that's the question. It's funny, as I was talking to my wife last night, I was like, I know he's going to ask me this question. I was like, you got to think about it. And so we were talking, and it was like, man, when you're in it, when we were going through it, my wife and I, and it is a we. I mean, we went through it together. I mean, I had cancer, but 100%. I mean, she was right there with me. And in a lot of ways, I think just from a practical standpoint, what I learned was how much more difficult it is for the one who's not sick. Because when you're the one who's sick, there's no expectations of you other than to just be sick.
Right.
And so I would wake up every day and I would just go out on the couch and I would just be sick. And I was just trying to get from one day to the next. Whereas my wife, now she's doing everything. So she's teaching still. She's doing her thing in the classroom. Then she's got to do everything around the house. I mean, she's got to take care of me. I'm on her mind, and she can't really do anything for me, just in terms of to make me better. Obviously, she supported me and loved me through that, and that was huge. But, I think a lot of times the other person can be forgotten when it comes to the support. And so that's one thing I learned is just how much those, the members of the family who aren't sick just also need that support because they're going through it too. But really, learned a lot, continuing to learn a lot. I think when I was going through it, it changes you and you don't realize that at the time. It's one of those things where you don't really know what's going on and how you're changing until you're through it and you look back.
Right.
And so for sure, the perspective just that I have about a lot of things is different now than it was there. I don't get as bothered by just like little things anymore. Now my players may beg to differ on that comment, but just little life inconveniences, they don't register like they used to. And one thing I've really come to appreciate is when I went through cancer and then depression and treatment and all that stuff, it opened up kind of different groups of people that I can now connect with and now relate to. I didn't know what it was like to go through cancer. I didn't know what it was like to be depressed. I mean, I was totally ignorant to mental illness in general. And I thought being depressed just meant you were sad. And like, well, just stop being sad. But then I got the chance to experience it, and so now that's allowed me to connect just on a real level with other people that are going through mental illness, particularly when when I have players that do that. And it's been so good to have those different groups of people that previously I couldn't connect with, didn't really have anything for. Just, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how, what they might need. And now to be able to kind of speak that language with those people that are currently in those situations has just been really good. And so I guess one thing I learned was just any trial or hardship that we go through, outside of the personal growth you experience, it also now allows you to connect with a different group of people that you previously couldn't connect with on that level. And so, even when I coached some teams, at Goshen that we didn't have great records, and now I look back and it's like, yeah, okay, well now I know what it's like to lose. And so now I can connect with coaches who are losing, and I know what it's like to be depressed, and I know what it's like to go through cancer. And so, just kind of having that view of just hard times in general, like, okay, well, this is what it's like. I can't forget this, because when God gets me through this, I'm going to be able to connect with some people and hopefully help some people because of this. And so that was big. And then honestly, Jason, it gave me a kind of a urgency to engage in discipleship that just wasn't there before. Yeah. Discipleship to me was an add-on before my cancer experience. And it was more just about me trying to do what I wanted to do and then trying to convince God to bless that, as opposed to, I know that life is short, I know that I'm not invincible. I know that I could go for a checkup and it could be back at any time. And so it's like you just kind of, you develop this sense of urgency of like, man, I can't waste any more days. And so that's been probably the biggest positive, is just that sense of urgency that this whole thing developed in me. And it's not like it happened right away, but looking back, 100%, it was in large part due to that experience.
Neal, let's close with this. Leave us with a Bible verse, message from the Word, something that's encouraging you lately, or has encouraged you, or maybe encouraged you during your cancer fight. That's been something that we can hear and be an encouragement to our listeners from the Bible.
Yeah, it's interesting you asked me that, because we've been talking about that a lot as a team, just kind of like different scriptures and the one that our team is really pouring into right now is John 15:4-5. Just remain in me and I in you. The branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it remains in the vine. Neither can you unless you remain in me. I'm the vine, you're the branches. Whoever remains in me and I in him, it is he that bears much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. And that's just this idea of, sometimes we get so caught up in the pursuit of the fruit, right? And sometimes as Christians, even we can get it backwards and feel like we're called to bear fruit. But, really we're not. We're called to remain in him. And we're called to do everything we can to just pour into that connection, and just remain and remain and remain, no matter what happens, remain. And then what happens is he does the heavy lifting for us. He bears the fruit in us. We don't have to bear it in ourselves. And that's just been really powerful for me lately. I think it's been really powerful for our team. And, I listened to, another one of your podcasts previously. There's a coach who was talking about just like basically what he was describing was just like a desperation for God every day. Yeah. And I think, that's what we're trying to produce. And that's what this verse really kind of gets at to me. It's just like, man, you got to be desperate to remain in the vine, because that's where it's at. It's not in us striving to do all these things out of our own abilities. Not that working hard is bad, but working hard apart from just that intense desire to remain, ultimately it's not going to be fruitful. And so that's just been really powerful for me. It's been, I think it's been some of our guys have really been pressing into, and so hopefully that can kind of encourage somebody.
It's really good. He is Neal Young, the Covenant College men's basketball coach. I should also add the title Cancer Survivor, which is probably the more important title. Neal, thanks for joining us here on the podcast. Been great to get to know you, to learn about your journey, and I'm sure this won't be the last time that we'll talk or interact. Thanks for being a part of the podcast, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks a lot, Jason.
And many thanks to Neal Young. He's the Covenant College men's basketball coach, Division III school near Chattanooga, Tennessee in Georgia. And we appreciate Neal for sharing his story and his powerful testimony of overcoming cancer and trusting in Jesus on the Sports Spectrum podcast. You can follow Neal on Twitter. Give him a follow over at Coach_Young, at Coach_Young. And Neal's got a great story. And again, give him a tweet. Let him know that you heard his story here on the podcast, and we'll be wishing him nothing but the best. The good news is we taped this in December, and he reached out to me right after we finished taping at the end of December to tell me that the prognosis is all great and the checkups are great, and he went to the doctors and there's no sign of any cancer. And so he's A-OK, and his health continues to be one that is cancer-free, which is tremendous news, certainly as he heads into the holiday season, into the new year here in 2019. So thanks to Neal for joining us on the podcast. We also thank you for listening. Again, you can reach us on Twitter at sports_spectrum. We're also on Facebook and Instagram as well. We'd love to hear from you. Tag us. Let us know that you heard the podcast. We'll retweet you and share and let others know that you're listening to our shows here at Sports Spectrum. You can also email me with any ideas for guests, jason@sportspectrum.com, jason@sportspectrum.com. Also want to encourage you to subscribe to our magazine. It's $18 for an entire year. Get you the Sports Spectrum magazine, the cornerstone, the foundation of this ministry. Started with a magazine back in 1985, and that magazine is still going strong here in 2019. $18 for an entire year, dirt cheap. Go subscribe, sportspectrum.com. That's the website, sportspectrum.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time right here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Have a great rest of your day.